It's Michael Caputo, and this is Still Standing. Thanks a lot for checking back in again. I really appreciate it. I'm about to go on Anderson Cooper tonight. I haven't really received my topic yet. The producers over at Anderson Cooper send the topics out around 4 o'clock. The show is on at 8. So, things really can change between now and 8 o'clock. Typically, though, the topic they pick at 4 o'clock they stick to. And I'm just watching the news, and usually, since I'm going to be going on CNN, I'm looking for the most negative thing about President Trump on the day that I'm being invited on CNN, and that's likely to be the topic they want me to address. And it looks like this, the allegations that the Saudis murdered the journalist Jamal Khashoggi seems to be what they're really focusing on. And, I don't know a great deal about the Middle East. I spent a little bit of time there, not that much. I have a lot of friends who are a lot smarter on the Middle East than I am. But I do know that I've seen these Saudi Arabian princes and kings, making their way around Washington ever since I first went there in the early 80s. I remember when I was working for President George H.W. Bush on his campaign, I went over to the White House for a meeting. And as I arrived, I saw a bunch of guys in traditional Saudi Arabian dress coming out of the building. They seem to have had the run of Washington for a long, long time. I mean, we always needed their oil, especially during the oil crises, and the OPEC meetings were always something we followed very, all of us followed very closely on the news. Things have really changed, though. I mean, America now doesn't really need the Saudis for their oil. We're a pretty major producer of oil and gas now ourselves. And we're not really a net exporter, but, we don't really need to, bend our knees to the Saudi Arabians or anybody else in the OPEC for that matter. But at the same time, I noticed that the Washington Post, where Jamal Khashoggi worked while he was self-exiled in the United States, and he wrote op-eds for the Washington Post. He was a journalist back in Saudi Arabia, and as a journalist there, he worked as an editor of one of the pro-government newspapers. And he was really deeply involved in politics over there. A lot of people think he was pretty connected to the secret services himself. The one thing I know about the Middle East, it is not an easy, uncomplicated situation there. I think perhaps the Saudi Arabians did kill Khashoggi as he went into the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey. But when things like this happen, I usually try to figure out who can benefit from it. And, this is not something so very cut and dried and simple. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, rather new to the scene, is Mohammed bin Salman. They call him MBS. And, he became pretty close to Jared Kushner over at the White House. That turned out to be a pretty good advantage for America, something we were able to work to our benefit. And MBS was a reformer, they say. He was the one that changed a lot of the rules in Saudi Arabia where women weren't allowed to drive. They now can. And he reopened the movie theaters, which were closed for a long, long time. And also, by the way, kind of purged the ranks of the royal family of the old Wahhabi clan. I mean, everybody there is a Wahhabist, but it looked like MBS was kind of moving away from it. When you say Wahhabi, you have to say Islamist. And when I say Islamist, those are people who believe in jihad. And, MBS was kind of moving away from the jihadists, the Wahhabis, the old Wahhabis. In fact, he put a bunch of them, he imprisoned them in the, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel or whatever it was, which is kind of funny, a prison named the Ritz. But they're all pretty angry, all these men, that he locked them up. They say that some were tortured. They say one lost his life. But MBS and all of his allies said they were corrupt and that they had stolen a lot of money from the regime. And there's a lot afoot there. But, who would benefit from this murder, if in fact Khashoggi was murdered? We don't know for a fact he was murdered yet. A lot of suspicion, based upon, by the way, the Turkish secret police. They say that they have audio of him entering the building, him being received in reception, him being pulled into a room, being interrogated, and then tortured, and then murdered, and then dismembered. They say they have audio of all of this. And let's not forget, this is the Turkish Secret Service. They're not exactly the most credible people in the world. And for all the people who hate President Erdogan of Turkey, suddenly his Secret Service is giving out credible information. I think, like President Trump, I'd like to find out the facts before I go out and do something outrageous or crazy, or even smart, against King Salman and MBS and Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of people that can benefit from this. One of them who would not benefit from it is MBS. Maybe he misjudged how Washington would react. This guy, Khashoggi, he's a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He was kind of connected to the old Wahhabi sects that MBS moved aside. And those people, by the way, have put a lot of money out there in Washington for about a generation. A lot of people in Washington have gotten really rich off of the Wahhabis that he moved aside. In fact, I think it's APCO, the PR firm in Washington, is on a $100 million a year contract with Saudi Arabia. That's, of course, was assigned by the old regime, the Wahhabists the Wahhabi leaders that he kind of moved aside. And I understand that the PR people are all kind of running for the hills in Washington right now. They're not really helping with this crisis that King Salman is suffering. But you also have to think of, Iran, Qatar, Turkey, the Muslim Brotherhood, and others, the old Wahhabi clans. They would really benefit from MBS being blamed for this. President Trump today, just a few hours ago, talked about how some, rogue security services might have done something to Khashoggi to try to either one, to create a crisis for MBS, who made a lot of people angry when he started the reforms that many Wahhabists, old-line Wahhabists, are against, allowing women to drive, opening the theaters, a lot of enemies for MBS in those reforms. If MBS is blamed for this, they'll benefit from it, of course. If he's moved aside, remember, he was not the crown prince for very long. He moved, the king moved his brother aside to put him in there. And that, what brother likes to be shoved aside in a royal family? I don't really know. I'm not like royal family material, but it sounds to me like he probably has an enemy in his brother. So, and of course the Saudi security services, they might benefit from MBS being blamed for this. And the other idea is that perhaps MBS underestimated how the reaction in Washington would be, how tough it would be after all this money has been spread around in Washington for so long. So rogue elements of the security service? I don't know. I do know that I don't believe Erdogan's people. I want to see real, honest-to-God proof. And I appreciate the fact that the president is taking a measured approach to this. And also, I really appreciate the fact that he, in a tweet this morning, said that he was sending Secretary of State Pompeo to visit with the king and talk about this immediately, the tweet said. The European countries, of course, banded together for a strong message calling for an investigation to the king. A strong European message. Read that as, chicken shit. But the President of the United States, he's sending his top diplomat, a member of his cabinet, one of his most trusted advisors, to go talk to the king. They say the president talked to King Salman on the phone today for about 20 minutes, and from that he's been talking a bit about rogue elements of the security services. I don't know if I believe that. I can tell you this, every single one of the players that I just brought up, Qatar, Iran, the Wahhabis, Turkey, the Muslim Brotherhood, Erdogan, every single one of them, they're bad guys. We're all sitting around here talking about how Erdogan's security services have this proof of this really terribly tragic and gruesome murder of this journalist. But, you know, the biggest, you know, probably the toughest, the most brutal anti-media, you know, leader in the Middle East could be Erdogan. So the idea that CNN and Washington Post are trotting out the idea that Erdogan's security services suddenly are the arbiter, or suddenly they're the arbiter of truth, I'm going to have a tough time with that on CNN tonight. I don't believe it. You know, I want more proof. I think America needs more proof. I think CNN needs more proof. But if you really want to get at the president, you go through his family. You go through Jared Kushner, his son-in-law. And if Jared Kushner's close to MBS, well, then crack MBS around a little bit. And you get to Jared, and you get to the president. Not sure how I'm going to handle that on CNN tonight on AC 360, but I'll do my best as usual. Michael Caputo here. Thanks a lot for tuning in to Still Standing. I look forward to talking to you again.